Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to talk about how we ditch D3 and mostly use Datawrapper. That kind of means D3 is a charting library where you can do very special charts. And we use a lot, but nowadays Datawrapper can do a lot of this stuff. But first of all, who we? We is these 10 people. We're 10 people working in an interdisciplinary team of journalists, developers, and designers for the German news outlet ZEIT Online, and our team called Data and Visualization. And what we do is we do a lot of data stories and visualization. If you want to check it out, you can find all our work here behind this thing. Yeah, we do a lot of data analytics, as you can see here. We publish interactive tool, just a calculator that tells you if you're middle class or not. That's the one thing we do a lot. We do personalization of charts. We do a lot of interactivity. And since COVID, we do a lot of dashboard, like this one that's called our energy monitor, where you can get daily updates about the energy mix or the status of wind turbine expansion in Germany. And you can find that information directly on our homepage, for example. We also do is very special stuff like this one. We experiment a lot with new visual formats, like this piece about space debris, where we calculated hundreds of thousands of debris based on data by the European Space Agency. And the examples I just showed you, I mean, they kind of look fantastic, but some times ago, our charts didn't, as you can see here. On the contrary, our basic charts really bad. Like this one, there were no labels, there was unnecessary interactivity and no focus in the chart. Or, for example, this one. There was a really long caption where you have to read like 1 minute to get the idea what the chart about. And I think it's not a good chart if you have to read first. And we also have pie charts and pie charts like this. So that's about the recommended daily food intake, but you can see it. So we really had to stop this madness. So we decided that from now on, all our charts should have the same quality standards as our bigger pieces you saw before. So, and most of the charts that were a little bit better than the ones you just saw were made with D3. D3, the charting library to create special chart types, which is more multiple animation, interactivity with search input and stuff like this, which wasn't possible with Datawrapper those days. And we created, for example, we used D3 to create more multiple maps like this, about the rent burden in German municipalities by income, or like this, for example, animation about the development corporate tax in Germany. The good thing is all that can now be done with Datawrapper, and that's I'm going to talk about in the following slide. But first of all, we had to make our charts beautiful. So, so the first thing is we had a look at all the great charts we know from other outlets, or the great charts we did maybe to have sort of an inspiration. And we had this Figma file here where we also created better color palette for light and for dark mode, and it was kind of a long process. What you can see here, our old chart design, a lot going on with a lot of horizontal line, different font types and sizes, and new chart type, kind of subtle, but at first glance probably changed a lot of details. We deleted all unnecessary lines. We had better spacing font sizes, and overall, we had a better visual hierarchy with bigger headlines and more subtle sources and nodes. So that every chart from now on is, uh, is something we can directly put in the text and don't have to create ones with D3 for ourselves. But we also started to treat charts the exact same way we treat text ZEIT Online. Every text at ZEIT Online has to be read by a minimum of 2 people. So every chart now had to be edited in a 4-hour minimum principle. What you can see here is a colleague asked Bügel, we call it like this, translated to iron. So that means someone has to edit the chart. You can see here, there are 24 answers in the thread here in Slack. And sometimes there's endless discussions about small things, such as colors, labels. So that really every chart worth publishing. We also have our own Slack bot where we can see when someone publishes or edits a chart, because everyone at ZEIT Online is allowed to publish charts. That means not everyone does it, but there are like maybe a dozen of people who create charts, and we want to see what they're doing and maybe helping them along the way and edit those charts. Yeah, so we had this new process, and now we had great charts. Like this, we had beautiful charts. This one is about additional burden of energy cost by income group. We have also new stuff to put methodology in there. We can click the small arrow next to the source. We can get more information, but you can't see it first. It doesn't distract you. Or this graphic about pension by gender. So now every chart we publish, it's edited and looks better than the ones you saw before. But now it's still kind of normal chart. We wanted to do a special thing with them, like for example, small multiple. So now at Datawrapper you have pie chart small multiples, all in a new feature, line chart small multiple. But what we can do now is we can use every chart type from Datawrapper to create small multiple. And we can do it directly in our content management system, what you can see here. We can create embed like this, but you can put it directly in the text where other colleagues maybe write the text. So you put in the embed, and you can put up to 6 Datawrapper links in there to have small multiples. And you can also tell it how many charts there should be next to each other on desktop or mobile. And maybe on the top left, in case you're wondering, our CMS has octopus as a logo, and even cooler, following the mouse pointer. I don't know why, but anyway, what we have now, a small multiple with Datawrapper. You can have 3 maps next to each other. On mobile, they are below each other. So they're interactive, and we have the fat lines and the sublines directly in our embed, and below that we can have these charts. We can put everything in there, also bar charts, stuff like that. And it was a huge thing for us. So we don't have to code it for ourselves. We just use Datawrapper in our embed, and we don't have to write one single line of code. Something like this we also did with Witcher. We had different embeds like this. You can show several charts with Witchers. This one is about the distribution curve, our travel times to different kind of hospitals in Germany. And now even possible for us to create scrolling directly in our content management system. Like this chart about flat prices in the biggest cities of Germany. And I show you the embed, how this works. You put in an embed that says like scrolling starting now. After that, you can put a Datawrapper chart if you want to show. And after that, you just put the text. And the good thing is, we can just put in our graphic in there, and our colleagues in other departments can write their text inside the content management system. So that was kind of the game changer for us. But still a little bit, something was missing about the personalization of chart. So what we have here is a chart about drought in Germany over time. And not only in Germany, but also in every county in Germany. Because personalization is something we use a lot at online. We want to answer the question, what does it really mean to me? And what you can see here is 400 different charts. But you have to create them first. And how we do this is we use R and the library Datawrapper. I'm not going to details here because there's another talk, I think tomorrow, that covers this topic. But basically, what it does is we use the Datawrapper API and create several charts based on one template chart. And this is kind of how it looks like if you create charts, hundreds of them, how it looks like if you create those charts. That's way more easy than create every chart for yourself, but it also kind of a downside because if you maybe have a minor change in your data or you want to change your chart style, you have to recreate all those charts again and again. So, and we once had, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 Datawrapper charts for every municipality in Germany. And it takes time if you want to change something, or even if you're already online and you maybe have to fix an error, and it takes like 10 minutes to recreate all the charts. If there only was a better way to do it, yes, there is. There's something called patch. It's a documented method called patch where you can change style and data of Datawrapper chart directly in the browser. Let me show you an example. What you can see here, the increasing and decreasing value of real estate in Germany, and you can choose different states from a drop-down, but we didn't create all the charts beforehand. It's only one Datawrapper chart. So you don't have to create them beforehand, and there's literally no loading time, doesn't add to your data volume. And how it's done, we use web component, the first thing, because it's 1 year, I think now you can embed Datawrapper chart without iframes, only the web component. And it's hot because you now can add things like a drop-down menu that can communicate with the code of Datawrapper. I'll show you one example. We have a huge community at ZEIT Online, and someone we created a chart, and he said, like, can you also add a search box to the bubble chart? At least on a cell phone, you can only tap on the othermost bubble. And it was like 7 months ago, and we weren't able to do that. You have a scatter plot, and there's a lot of dots in it, and you can't search for one item, only with the mouse, on mobile, kind of hard. But now the really nerdy answer is we can do that with web component and the patch method. And I'll show you how it's working. This is the scatter plot, and now you can put in a city in there and only highlight that city. So this is the Datawrapper web component about the comparison of rents and salaries. And now we were able to personalize the data, what we normally do a lot, which helps a lot. So on how it works, everything you do in the Datawrapper UI and the Datawrapper tool, you can also see in the browser console. So if you tell Datawrapper, for example, here to have all bubble in gray instead of the one from Leipzig in pink, the city, you can see that in the console called metadata access color. And now in the code, let's have a look at the code. It takes the name of the city inside here in the drop-down menu, and we can patch this patch the property, and so just these lines of code to make the Datawrapper chart even more interactive. And imagine, like, you can also put a geocoder right next to a map where people can use can see the data from their municipality, for example. But that's not all. You can also create animation like this about the inflation in Europe with Datawrapper. But there's one tiny thing here. Here we didn't use the patch method. It was kind of the old way. We created a lot of images beforehand, and then we stitched them together for the animation. Kind of work, but imagine you have to create one for light mode, one for dark mode, and the labels weren't great on mobile, so it's not that perfect, but it's way easier to do with patch. For example, here, that's the data about world map of obesity data from 1990 till 2022. You can see here each row is the country name, and each column is 1 year. So with the code, you now can we can now embed this Datawrapper chart on our website. Just change the column every second, so we can create an animation. So you can see it here, like before, the metadata access values, it gets the year, and for every second it changes the column where it gets the data from. Before I show the end result, one quick warning. I'm not a developer, so please don't ask me about the specific, but if everyone is interested in this, I'll be happy to connect one of my colleagues. And patching is still undocumented. It still has to be used with caution, but it's so great for us that we started working with it and have so much great results. And I have to show you this. An animation directly in with Datawrapper, perfect on mobile, dark mode, and crisp text SVG instead of video compression artifact like before, and wait for it, also interactive. So you have an animation of a Datawrapper chart, and in the end, it's interactive. So we definitely don't need D3 anymore for stuff like that. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julius. Really interesting talk. Wild the stuff that you're doing over there with Datawrapper, things that us developers of the products couldn't even imagine when we were building it, perhaps. So let's get some questions then. Let's see. Patrick has a question about how ZEIT uses Datawrapper. He asks, does only your team create infographics on Datawrapper, or is it every journalist free to use it?
Once we wanted to have every journalist to have Datawrapper training when they start their job and the onboarding process, but our company is growing and it wasn't possible anymore, and there were too many people. But I think we have on every department, we have 1 or 2 people who like to create charts themselves. So most of the charts are by our team, but we have people in other departments. And what I talked about, like 2 years ago, they were able to publish it directly in their text, but now we have this editing process where we definitely go over the chart and make it a little bit more polished.
Cool. I think I may know the answer to this, but Jackie, if that's how you pronounce your name, asks, how did your team figure out how you could do this? What rabbit hole led you to this point?
Someone gave us a tip that it is possible, and if you have a look at the browser console, you can see stuff like this, and then we just hacked it. Yeah, but a lot of stuff I showed is in the Datawrapper API, and you can play around with it. And sometimes there's just an idea what we want to do, and then we have to have a look at the specifics we want to do, and most of it can be done in the code.
Great. I have a question of my own. You say you've ditched D3 for Datawrapper, but surely there are still cases where there are visualization types that you just can't achieve with Datawrapper. Perhaps it's a Sankey or something that Datawrapper doesn't do. How do you find those boundaries? How do you make that decision?
Absolutely. Also, one thing I just showed you is our dashboard, the energy monitor, which is directly on our homepage. That has really tiny charts, really special tiny charts. It would be maybe doable with Datawrapper, but therefore it was easier for us to do them in D3. Like maybe if we're gonna really special small chart for the homepage also. But we also have to look at the size of the JavaScript. So it's the minimum size that has to be loaded. But yeah, and as you mentioned, if it's not a kind of basic chart type, we produce a lot of maps, produce a lot of bar charts and line charts because I think it's our readers are used to them and can read them. But we want to make it kind of special. But charts like Funkies or stuff like that, we have still to use D3.
Cool. We have a few practical questions about practical implementation. Patricia asks, what coding language do you use for the patching method, and how can I get started?
What we use is React. We might want to switch to Svelte, but yeah, it's in JavaScript.
And Nico asks, if Datawrapper changes something, will old charts change or are they stable?
They are stable. You can't republish it. So if the chart is published, it still works, even if Datawrapper changes something.
Stefan asks, do you have a funnel that brings all journalist created Datawrapper graphics to your consciousness?
Yes. We have a Slack bot. If I get this question, yeah, we have a Slack bot that shows us if a chart is edited or published, so we can see who publishes it and if we can help them. So yeah, but that's really important. And we can also see like today there's a lot going on. Might work a little bit more with our colleague to help them with their chart. Sometimes the Slackboard is empty. So yeah.
Let's see. Priya asks, how does one access viz.patch? Are you willing to share your secret source with us yet?
You said that I'm not a developer. I don't actually know.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that I see in the chat. Any last minute questions coming in? Otherwise, we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you so much, Julius, for being here.